So we didn't have time yesterday to go over the questions that you had answered. So, excuse me, in regards to depression. So I am going to go ahead and do that right now. So here are the two questions. I gave everyone, of course, 2 points for the attempt, and it's good practice. Again, you guys will be taking your NCLEX, so I try to throw that in there. And I will give tips and tricks. So as we go along. So for the first one, and again, or not again, but I have not mentioned this. I have mentioned that I know the Kaplan method. There's absolutely no way I can teach the Kaplan method while I'm doing this because that's like a, 3-day course, but I can still take from that and give you, cues and hints and things like that. So that's another reason why we do this. I mentioned that in my review for quiz 1 as well. So, all right, let's just jump into it here. So the first one is about depression. And before we start, I'm going to say it one more time. I did say it probably at some point, but the NCLEX is basically testing for safety. So when you come to the minimum amount of questions that you can get on your NCLEX, and I always forget if it's 75 or 85 because I teach in both programs, but either way, let's say it's 75, I think it's 85 for VN, but let's say it's 75. Once you get to that point, the computer reads you, it's computer adaptive, and says, well, is so-and-so safe enough for us to turn off the test now? If you are, they turn it off. If they feel like you are just absolutely just not safe enough and there's no point in moving forward, they'll turn it off. So you won't know at that point until you get your test results. I will say this, I'll say it probably 25 times. I've never met anybody who's taken the NCLEX that's walked out that said, I passed that test. Everyone that I've ever talked to, hundreds of students, including myself, and I passed both times I took my test for VN and RN. You just feel like you failed. It's a roller coaster, if you will, but definitely worth it in the end. So then what happens is if you're on the line and they're like, well, I'm not really sure if let's give them some more questions. They haven't quite proved themselves to us yet. Then they'll keep giving you questions until you reach a point either where you've reached a point where you proved it and then it turns off. It could turn off at 76, turn off at 100, it can turn off at 285 or 275 or something like that is the most questions. I don't know why I can't remember those numbers, but for whatever reason I cannot. Or unfortunately the other way where it's just kind of like, okay, we've given this person enough time and chances, we're just going to turn it off. And then I'm just going to leave it at that. I could go way more into depth, but at the end of the semester, I do offer, I think I mentioned this, a free NCLEX class. It's not through Mission College unless they make it for VNs through Mission College. I do one for the RNs through Mission College, but I still do it for free. And I'm just saying it's not sponsored by Mission College, basically, to help you guys out because I want to. Okay. Please note that I always kind of give that a spiel in the beginning before I talk. So if you don't want to listen to me spiel, just fast forward it. Okay. So let's get to the questions. So a couple things that we always want to look at for questions is number one, if they give an age, perhaps age may make a difference, right? Because of developmental capacity and how you would deal with that patient, depending on if they're a child versus somebody who is, 20 versus somebody who is, 60, and all of those things can come into play. We also want to look at procedures. Did they have procedure? Did they have surgery? What do they have done? And also, what is the question actually asking? Because a lot of the time they'll throw in some information that has nothing to do with it. And, or like I mentioned in my last video about the quiz, they'll just add all the stuff that almost makes you add in stuff too. And then one thing we really, really don't want to do is take our own life experience and add it into it, because in the NCLEX world, we're testing for the NCLEX world. So the NCLEX world is perfect. You have enough towels, enough CNAs. If the world were only like that, right? Enough CNAs. We need so many. If we had one for every patient, oh, wouldn't that be nice? and such good patient care. And it's a perfect world, if you will. And so keeping that in mind, safety, always thinking of safety and what the question is actually asking. Because again, they will try to confuse you. That is because they want you to be a critical thinker. I mean, of course I would too. If myself or my family is going in, I want a critical thinker to be able to help my family member. I'll continue as I'm doing these to kind of point things out. But one other thing I want to say that I find very important when I'm answering questions, and I still practice to this day because new questions come out all the time, is when the procedure or whenever was done. So is 1 hour going to make a potential different answer than a 1 day, 5 days, a month? Of course. I mean, if somebody just had something done and all of a sudden their abdominal, like they just had abdominal surgery and now their abdomen is like bloating up, and they just had surgery, I'm going to be worried about bleeding immediately. Not saying you can't bleed a month later, but that was just kind of a example. All right, so let's jump into it. So we are now answering questions on depression. So several days. So several days. That's a time. So I'm going to pay attention to that. After being admitted for depression, they're giving me a diagnosis. So that's not a procedure or a surgery, but that's a diagnosis. So we want to pay attention to that. A client sits alone in the dining room. The nurse notes that the client has not finished the meal. Which nurse action is best? Okay, so usually it's the last sentence. It's kind of telling you what they want. So which nursing action is best? What is the best thing that I can do for this patient? This works for some people and some it doesn't, but for me, it does. If I could do one thing and one thing only and walk out of the room, what would I do? For some people that messes with them and then don't use it. So take what you want, leave what you don't. So I know several days. Okay, well, that's not good that they're, not really, doesn't look like they're eating much, not finishing their meals. And as we know, eating usually is a very social interaction. And when someone's depressed, they're usually isolating and whatnot. Again, this is a perfect world. So in a perfect world, would a nurse, our world right now, would we have time to sit with a patient while they're eating their meal? More than likely not. But remember, this is a perfect world. And what is going to be the best for the patient? Another thing to remember is that we never pass the buck. So that's what I call it. At one, Kaplan calls it, meaning if a patient were sitting at the bedside, there's a question actually, is it in this one? No, it's in the next one, which we'll do later, about a towel and holding a towel and have, I think something about having the wife watch the patient. That's called passing the buck. So if I'm telling the patient's wife to watch the patient and something happens, that's on me. We don't pass the buck. So we don't say, have someone else do our job. I'm not saying team wise. I'm saying like that, which will make more sense as we do more questions. All right. What's going to be best for this patient to hopefully help them eat? And actually there is a pass the buck in here. So sit with the client in the dining room during meals. Okay, I like this. I think this would be great. And it's a perfect world. So I would have time to do this because I can do more assessment, maybe find out more about them, talk to them. So hopefully they'll eat and get more information about what's going on and maybe why they're not eating. Number 2, ask the client, and remember, assess. We assess first. That's the first part of the nursing process. That's important to always remember, nursing process. Number 2, ask the client's family to bring in favorite foods for the client. A lot of people like this answer, and I can totally see why. And we do, and if you, again, we're bringing in our own experience, I see this happen all the time. It's not wrong, but again, what is the best answer for you? And it says right here, which nursing action is best? So if you compare these two, looking at that, it's going to be number 1, that's a nursing action. I'm sitting with the patient. I'm assessing. I'm getting more information. It's not just kind of covering it, let's just cover up the problem, bring in some food. And if they're not eating already, more than likely, they're not going to be eating what their family brings them. And hopefully if you're sitting with them, they'll tell you, I'm not eating because I don't like the food. I'm not eating because I'm not hungry. I'm not, that kind of thing. So that hopefully that helps with why number 1 is a better answer than number 2. Number 3, ask the client to write down a list of favorite foods. Same thing. So if you see similar answers that stick out together and they look similar and it's not a select all that apply, it's probably not going to be one of those answers, right? So those are very, very similar because they're doing the same thing. The patient is not eating. Number 1 is talking about actually socializing with the patient, finding things out about the patient. The other 2 are just, hey, what do you want to eat? It's not really getting to the core root of what's going on. Why isn't this patient eating? And number 4, and that is provide the client with high calorie and high protein nutritional supplemental beverages. And that's another one that students tend to like. But again, if you look at number 2, number 3, and number 4, you're kind of just not covering the problem, but hopefully that makes sense. Number 1 sticks out like a sore thumb. Number 1, because you're probably thinking, or some people, many people think, I remember the first time I read, I'm like, no, but then I remembered, okay, perfect world, this and that. Number 1 really sticks out. The other 3, they're very, very similar. So number 1, being able to sit with the client, and I've already explained why this would be important in assessment and whatnot. So the credited answer and correct answer would be number 1, to sit with the client. And then I'm not going to do this just for time wise, but I always go back and I reread the question again. You have like 6 hours to take your NCLEX, reread the question again, because you may have incidentally read it wrong or missed something. Okay. And again, if you guys have questions about these, just like if you do about the quizzes or anything that I'm posting, make a little mark, a little note, and then ask me in class, because I'm sure maybe other people have questions too. Okay. The second one, an individual calls the crisis hotline and says it's over. I've done all I know how to do. Which response by the nurse is best? Okay. Keeping this in mind, these questions I do put on quizzes, tests, midterms, finals. So, and I will put that on the study guide. I'm going to say something. I personally I struggle with this question, because I personally think, now this is not the answer. So if you put this on your quiz or test, you will get it wrong. I want to make sure that's crystal clear. But I personally would first ask, what do you mean by it's over? Because I don't know what that means. But again, what did I just say? It's about safety, 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 safety. So if you could ask one question, right? So you can only ask them one question. What are you going to ask them? Of course, you're going to ask number 4. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Because and I'm hoping that you're listening to this and going, oh my gosh, okay. I totally get, because none of these are bad. I would do actually all of these, 1 through 4. I would ask all these questions, but it's in what order, right? So which response is best? What do you mean by it's over? Have you shared your feelings with your family? Have you been taking antidepressant medications? And are you thinking of hurting yourself? Probably ask them all these questions. The answer is, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Because it has to do with safety. And then hopefully we can de-escalate the situation, get a welfare check, make sure the patient's okay. A lot of people go to number 1 or number 4, but I can also see absolutely why the other 2, I mean, right? This is a hard question. So the reason I really like to pick this question is to show you that there are many, many times you will do all the things or 3 out of the 4 things, but it's which one if you could only do that one thing, what would you do? So hopefully that makes sense. Again, please, if it does not, feel free to make a little note and let's talk about it in class. And I'm just trying to see if there's anything that I can add. So again, the answer is not number 1. So if I put it on a test, please don't put number 1. I'm making such a big fuss about this because at another school I teach at, I said this, and I guess I didn't make a big enough fuss about it. And so many people put number 1, even though I made it very clear. And I went back and heard my recording because I recorded the class because it was on Zoom and it was like a 4-hour class. And I clearly said what the right answer was. And I just want to make sure 100% that everybody knows the answer is, are you thinking of hurting yourself because of safety, right? So the reason I like number one is because it's clarification. What do you mean? What's over? The TV show's over, your life is over, well, what's over? And I would want that clarification. However, absolutely, number four would be the first thing that we would ask. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? All right. I'm not going to keep talking anymore. I hope that you got something from that and some tips and tricks. And I will always add more and more and more and just keep building your foundation for test taking as well. And this is the last video I'm going to do tonight. I will post it Tuesday as well after I post my other video. It might not be till after post conference, but it will be up. Thank you so much, everyone. And let me know if I can be of help.